Good morning, good afternoon, and good day wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live, now globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio through IBGR, the world's #1 business talk, news, and strategy radio network. Today, we're discussing how AI and leadership drive business growth. We have a special guest, Arnaud Lucas, to help us with the discussion. A CTO and VP of engineering at Wanderoo, Arnaud's hands-on experience in scaling teams, leveraging data, and driving innovation offers valuable lessons for anyone looking to thrive in a tech-driven landscape. But before we bring him on, let's go around the set and introduce everyone. And while we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend? Ping them, have them join us. We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience, and audience participation is highly encouraged. Right. So with that, introductions. Bertrand, would you kick us off, please?
Sure. My name is Bertrand Odillo, and I have to say, I'm the founder and managing partner of Odysseus & Co., working with customers to generate more conversations. And I'm very happy to be here today because we will be two French native in that call, and I'm so glad. That doesn't happen very often. So.
Très bien.
Great. Thank you.
Three? I thought he said two. Thank you, Bertrand. Tracy.
Good morning, everyone. Tracy Borson, founder of TLB Coaching and Events, where we care about marketing that works for businesses, not just marketing to do marketing. Proud partner of DLA Ignite. And I'm too really excited because I'll tell you, there's a lot of talk about AI and marketing, and most of it's not useful. So I'm super happy to have a good focused conversation on how it can be beneficial today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Adam.
Hello, everybody. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and a conversation about AI is always welcome. So I'm looking forward to this.
Excellent. Thank you. And Tim.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, famous for writing the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. And as Adam said, any discussion on AI, I think, is excellent because I think there's always something that we can learn.
Absolutely. And myself, I am Rob Durant. I am the founder of Flywheel Results. We help startups scale. And I, too, am a proud DLA Ignite partner. As I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Arnaud Lucas. With a track record of transforming organizations and driving exponential growth through AI and innovation, Arnaud brings unique insights on how technology can create scalable solutions and build high-performing teams. Let's bring him on. Arnaud, good morning and welcome.
Bonjour.
Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. Arnaud, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what led you to where you are today.
So, as you can hear from my accent, I'm originally from France, as Bertrand suggested. But I've been living in the US for 26 years, so it has been a while. First 8 years in Texas, showed up there to follow my love, I guess, my wife now. And then when she was done with her studies, moved to Boston, effectively, where I've been for the last 18 years. And so, as you mentioned, I'm a CTO/VP of engineering. I like to lead and inspire high-growth, technology-first organizations and customer focus to really kind of solve customer problems. I use technology as a tool more than anything else. And yeah, I like to create high-trust, high-performing teams. I like to match strategic ambitions to technological execution and whatever that means. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's start with a foundational question.
Mm-hmm.
How can leaders align AI strategy with business goals?
So that's the thing. Like, AI is a tool, right? And by the way, AI is not new. Like, my minor was actually in AI, so it was a while back. Generative AI, I think, which is the newer concept, of AI. It's still a tool, right? And I think people kind of confuse that a bit, where there is an expectation that every company should be using Gen AI at this point. Right? There is an expectation by the market, by the investors. And I think this expectation is because, contrary to the previous waves of technology like crypto and blockchain, is more like there is AI or Gen AI is such a tool that can be used in different contexts, and every company should be able to use it. Now, I understand that expectation, right? If you cannot do Gen AI, it means that you're not innovative enough, right? That's kind of the reasoning behind it. The problem with that is that when you look in the reality of things, is that there are really two main use cases of AI, right? There is the co-pilot use cases, which is you use AI as a way to help you do your job. And to some extent, companies have little say about that. I will argue that employees may just use AI without even companies knowing about it. So strictly speaking, I'm sure that every company out there is actually using Gen AI in some ways, but they may not know it. The other use case is more like be able to integrate Gen AI as a tool into your product, right? What you are selling to your customers. That becomes way more complicated because companies today have created a lot of prototypes, right? They have saying, oh, well, we can have a chatbot for our customer service. We can do this and we can do that. Like there are plenty of places where Gen AI seems like a good idea. And to create this prototype is actually not that hard, right? You take a model, you feed it with some of your proprietary data. In some way, you can do RAG, you can do fine tuning, you can do all your own training altogether. And from that, you're like, okay, let's ask questions, get answers, everything's good, extract insights. And the problem is not that, right? Because it's a tool, it works well most of the time. The problems are the hallucinations. And because of the hallucination, that's what prevents companies from going to production with these tools in a lot of cases. Like people are doing a lot of prototyping right now, but not that many are actually making it into production. And I think that's the biggest hurdle, right? Is how do you mitigate hallucinations? How you're able to effectively make it so that you don't create more risk for your organization and you create that liability even for your organization with AI doing some crazy stuff because now you have this autonomous thing that at the end of it doesn't really think. Right? That's not what Gen AI does. It doesn't do any reasoning. It only tries to guess what's the next token in a string of tokens. So I think that's the tough part. So I do believe that ultimately it's all about trying it out and see where it can help. I will argue that at first you want to use an approach called as responsible AI, which is effectively that you don't trust AI. Right? So usually that means that you have a human in the loop, or you have some other ways to check that whatever AI is doing is right, instead of exposing directly the output, if you want, of anything AI directly to your customer. Right? I think for me that's the biggest thing for now that a company should be considering. Finding these use cases, right, about how to integrate AI into your strategy is actually not that hard because AI can be used for all kinds of things, right? So it's more about what is your critical need, where is there a critical opportunity for improvement, for optimization, and then prototype it. And then the most difficult part, in my opinion, is how do you box it so that it doesn't go wild.
So you spoke about AI hallucinations, where AI misinterprets the landscape and it goes down a path which is inappropriate or fundamentally wrong.
Yes.
I have not tried, we as a business have not tried to package up AI and sell it to customers. But from an observational perspective, when I look at most human beings, they want to be lazy. Mm-hmm. We all do. We want to do the least work possible to achieve the outcome that we want to get. And AI seems like a perfect tool to enable us to do this, whether that's writing something that you're not confident writing or you haven't got time to write, or automating a marketing process, or whatever it may be. So isn't the danger that AI gets better and people simply ignore the hallucination possibility and go, that'll be fine because it saves me spending 6 hours doing this and AI can do it in 10 seconds, and they just switch it on and off it goes?
So let me give you an example, because I think that's a copilot model I was mentioning, where people rely on AI to do their job in some shape or form, right? And I do believe there's a use case for that. And I do believe that's the safest use case if people don't get lazy, to your point. However, by the way, I don't think people are lazy. I think people try to optimize.
French way of saying it.
So I think that's how I see it as an engineer. But I like to optimize my time so I can do more gardening and baking and other things. But I'll give you an example. So one evening, I have a 7th grade daughter, and so she came back from school, and I came back from work, and she says, "Dad, I have this math problem that nobody in my class is able to solve." It's like, okay, it's kind of surprising. It's like, yeah, we asked the dad of my friend with an MBA graduate, and he could not solve it either. I was like, oh, interesting. That seems like a challenge. And so what I look at the problem, I solve it, nothing hard, right? And then I do all the calculations, I come up with the results, we plug the results into our app, right? Because it's a website that you can just like put the results in. And the website says, oh, your result is wrong. At that point, it's like, oh, most likely your teacher put the wrong answer. It's not, just that, right? But I was like, you know what? We're going to double check with ChatGPT, right? So put the plan into ChatGPT, word for word. ChatGPT, give me the right step by step. So, okay, that looks good, right? You're matching, that's great. Plug the right number, great. Give me the wrong result. And no, that's not surprising because math, ChatGPT or any generative AI doesn't do math. So expecting it to do math is a plan. But a lot of people don't know that, especially one of my daughter's friend so I double check my number just to, and say, oh, no, I'm right, ChatGPT is wrong, great. But one of my daughter's friends started saying, oh, well, I found the right answer. This is the right answer. And that's exactly the answer that ChatGPT gave. And she was saying, oh, this is the right answer. I'm sure of it. Just because she has the AI and the AI produced something. And so I think for me, it's not because people may be lazy, even so there is an opportunity for people not to double check what AI is saying. Like I've seen plenty of issues, for example, even for my own use case. So I'm searching a company and they ask the AI, so when was the company founded? And I say, give me a date, and I double check, and no, it's a different date. It's like, so there is some double checking that needs to happen. But also what I'm more worried about actually is people not even recognizing when there is a hallucination and taking that as a truth, right? Because they don't understand what Gen AI is doing under the hood, or just because there is lots of magic that happens in there between the input and the output.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we get that. You talk about the school situation. You get that with your children anyway, don't you? Where the teacher says it's A and you say, no, it's not. And they say, yeah, but my teacher says it is. And they're my teacher, so they must be right. And we've now got AI to contend with in the same way. So the problem is one of me not having the confidence in my answer and assuming that because AI says it is this, it is this. So how do we safeguard against that?
Can I just add like a little onto that before Arnaud answers the question? Because something I think of as you're describing this, Adam, is like, I feel like there's situations where there is a right answer, and 2 + 2 is 4. And so if I ask you 2 + 2 is 4 and you tell me it's 3 and you're hallucinating, then that's a problem because it's actually now a wrong answer. If you ask the question, when was this company founded? And it's not the day the company was founded, it's actually a wrong answer. But I also think there's a potentiality to take advantage of that because there's also questions that don't have right answers. And even one of the phrases Adam used was my answer. Okay? So like, what's the difference between my answer and the answer? And does that make a difference into how we might want to use generative AI?
That's a good point. For me, as an engineer, I see it a slightly different way, right? I mean that you're right? Sometimes there is not right answer, but that's why we call them hallucination and not bugs, right? Because bugs suggest that there is a problem with the code, right? There is a software issue that, and therefore it's supposed to be right, and it's not doing the right thing. So therefore, there's a bug in the software that causes it to not the right thing. But here for GenAI, we talk about hallucination exactly for that purpose, because how it can go wrong can actually, some of that we just talk about what I call factual hallucinations, right? So it doesn't give you the right facts. Okay, to your point, that's easy to check. Not only that, but to mitigate that or to verify that, that's easy, right? You can have your own data set. You can say, okay, GenAI, give me this. Is it right? No, okay, well, wrong. So that's actually the easier kind of mitigation of hallucination to deal with, because you can just check it. But there are other kind of hallucinations. Another case, logical hallucination, which is funny that it's even called a hallucination, because GenAI is not logical. So it's like, okay, that's an interesting kind of bug for something that's not what it does. And then there is contextual hallucination. I think that's what you're getting into, which is when the model generates an output that conflicts with the provided instructions or context, right? So, well, you ask for something, and you may not have given everything there should be about that thing, and therefore, the model tries to do its best to guess what should come next, but it goes in the wrong direction. And so, in that case, the question is that there is nothing wrong or right about it. It's just the way it is, and it's a very subjective understanding from your side. Oh, you gave me the wrong answer. But maybe it's the user error, or the user was wrong. So I think that's that. And in that case, to your point, what the tool generates is perfectly valid, and it's just that it doesn't meet your expectations. And then the question is how to make sure that's where things like prompt engineering is one use case where you kind of massage your prompt to get to the right answer that you're expecting.
We have a few comments from the audience. First, Andrew Slesser checking in and says, for those who wonder why all the presenters wave at my message, it's that I wave back to them. This interaction shows the power of social media. Andrew, it's always good to see you. And Rob Turrell shares with us, if anyone watches the UK program, is it QI or Key? QI would question everything we were originally taught. We are also learning from different biases too, from history. Good point there. So there is a case to be made for your fact and my fact. But I don't think that applies to some absolutes like 2 + 2. So,
but then where does it apply and where does it not apply?
I'm sorry, you wanted the philosophical show? That's
I think it was a business show.
I feel like there's a lot of philosophical stuff happening in the world of AI. Just saying.
You're not wrong.
So I've got a question. So the thing about it, the show's about AI and leadership, and what I'm interested in is what should the leadership be doing about AI? Because I think that probably a lot of it's a bit like social media. A lot of the employees will be able to access social media, and even if you block it on desktops, they'll still access it through mobile. And so AI will have seeped into an organization, whether the leadership like it or not.
Yes, that's correct. And I think in that case, the goal is actually to embrace AI. Not that you have a choice, right? Like I said, there is an expectation you should be using it anyway. So for every company. So I think the question is not if, is how, and how to embrace Gen AI. Same thing, to your point, employees will use it anyway, because so what companies have done effectively is provide their own AI for employees to use effectively, and then try to prototype things that potentially they could launch in production within their own products. Right, so to kind of for that, at least for that market reason, hopefully there are some good use cases that they can still use for AI. The main issue is that we talk about hallucinations a lot, and it's not as easy as just, oh, this is a great tool, everybody should use it, and we're done. Right? There is that notion of responsible AI that companies then need to figure out how to implement. Right? Because you can't just, to your point, you can't just let it go free. You have to kind of box it in some ways. The best way, obviously, is that you provide your own AI, right? And then you can put a white verification layer on top. You can mitigate things in different ways. There are different techniques for doing that. But I've also heard employees that say that the AI that has been provided to them by companies is actually not that great. So in that case, they are still going to go outside the box and say, hey, let me ask ChatGPT instead. The problem with using tools like ChatGPT, there are multiple issues, right? One is that ChatGPT is meant, just focus on ChatGPT, but it can be Claude, it can be Gemini. They are meant to be generalists, right? They are meant to have been trained on a lot of different type of inputs from everywhere, sometimes in a conflicting fashion, actually. And they are not meant to solve any problem in particular. Right? They are just giving you this broad understanding of the world. So they are not necessarily great for specialized tasks. And that's why people are talking about training specialized models on their own data for their specialized use case instead of using this generic model. And so that's an interesting aspect, is that I don't think, at least at first, I don't think companies within their own product will actually use, or the best use case to use this general Gen AI. I think it's going to be more about having specialized model that fits a very specific purpose, just like we did before with machine learning. Or it's not different; it's just a variation of that. For their own employees, the question becomes, what do you let the employees do and what you don't let the employee do? And I think that's a hard topic, right? In a lot of companies, I think that they just let it go free. The problem with that is more like ChatGPT or any kind of general AI like this. If you ask a lot of questions, does algorithm get trained from that too? Right? Effectively, whatever you tell ChatGPT kind of feeds into its input at some point. And so that means that potentially data from companies actually leaking and may come back in some other ways to some other companies who will say, hey, I want to do something like this. And they'll say, oh, yeah, well, this is how you do it. And actually that came from your own company because you used ChatGPT to figure that out in the first place. So there is a danger there. And you've seen that with specifically like using AI for generating images, where a lot of artists complain, hey, this is my work. Like, what are we doing? Because ultimately, AI is very good at repackaging, right? Knowledge, and be able to implement that and be able to give you that as an output in a slightly different fashion. So I think that's the part that you need to be very concerned about, is how do you protect your data?
So Arnaud, with everything we've said so far, and given the caution that we should all take around this, the usage of this, and I'm actually quite interested in your views on how, as a leader, you should actually behave. Do you consider this an experiment? Do you consider, which seems to be the case, right? And because of the promise of productivity gains, releasing more time, the good old bullet points on innovation. Do you have a framework, or what's your take on this?
So yes, I do have a framework. I don't know if you are aware of the tech radar, right? So it's kind of this target thingy, and you have technologies on the outside of the target, and then as the technology gets proven and gets more and more used in the organization, they go into the middle of the target, right? And then when they become obsolete, they come out of the target. But that's what the tech radar is, right? You put things on hold, you trial them, so there are different stages. And for me, my framework is that where does GenAI fit into that? And for me, it's in trial mode, meaning that you have some use cases that you're prototyping with, and potentially you are even using it more as that co-pilot notion of helping you, but it's not in production yet. It's not authorized for use across the organization. Right, so you're not at that stage yet. Right, you're not. It hasn't been proven as a thing you can just say, "Oh, yes, it worked perfectly in production for this and this use case." Therefore, now every team in every part of the company can make use of it. So I think that's why I see it. Right, it's still too early. I do believe there is opportunity obviously for the models to improve as well, because right now that on a daily basis I see hallucinations. Right, it's not just once in a while. No, it's very common. So I will argue that we're not in that proven middle of the target space yet with generative AI. Now, can we be? Yes, but we're not there yet.
Well, clearly, as a daily user, what I can say is that the same question doesn't get the same answer. If you ask twice the same question, you may not get the same answer, which is kind of disturbing for someone who's been spending 30 years in IT. When you are kind of trying to the point that if you ask twice the same question, you should get the same answer. Now, I don't know yet if it's a challenge, but or maybe I'm just using it, in some areas where I should be still doing things differently. So I do agree that there's a learning curve basically. But I would assume that if you've got you lead an organization of 100,000, 10,000 people. And you're still looking for efficiency gains, for instance, or you're sold on that promise. That must be still a challenge to say, well, it's not yet ready, and at the same time, I see my competition is actually using it. So it's kind of a race, like on every innovation. So just food for thoughts on this, and maybe brilliant ideas that you could have and share.
I mean, the problem with generative AI is deceptively easy to use, right? And what I mean by that, right, is everybody can use generative AI today, right? They just show up on Gemini and start using it. It's like, I have my nemesis, which is plastic wrappers. Right? You get your package. And you're trying to open something like I was baking a cake from the cranberry sauce left over from Thanksgiving, and so I had this vanilla extract. I was trying to open it, and there's this little plastic wrapper on top, and it took me like 15 minutes to open that plastic wrapper because they are supposed to be an easy-to-use way to open it. I could not open it, so finally I took some scissors and then went at it. And I feel like it's the same thing with generative AI, right? It's easy to use until it's not, and that's the issue, is to figure out that 15%, and making sure that doesn't going to bite you back effectively. So I agree that ultimately the cat is out of the bag, contrary to other technologies before. There is even with other technology, there is a place for it, and I believe that place would be wild and wide, meaning that it's going to be across different industries, doing different things all over the place. The problem is that right now is kind of a Wild West, right? So we're still trying to figure out where it can probably be used and how. Right, and that's why you have so many startups doing generative AI, and it's because people are still trying to figure out what the best use for those tools. Everybody claiming that this is going to be fantastic to use it for this or for that, but people are still trying it out yet. So I agree it's a race, but I believe as well that you have to be careful, right? The first to win the race is not necessarily may not be the best because of the liability and the risk that you're taking. So be careful about that.
So here's something. So leadership needs to be aware of AI in its use, and needs to maybe champion AI within organizations. But I can see a potential problem here, and there are two strands to that. First is this idea of AI getting things wrong. So you Arnaud, said about hallucinations. Bertrand, you said you asked the same question twice and get two different answers. So that's potentially quite a big issue. And when I worked in a large organization, one of the things that amazed me was that the organization hired really good people, and then it treated the really good people like they were stupid. So it said, we're hiring you to do this job, but we will write a process or a set of KPIs that behave as if you know nothing about what it is you're doing. And the challenge here is certainly in large organizations that there's a real possibility that the leadership may not trust the people within the organization. And as a result of that, they will always believe that the AI or the electronic or the digital solution is the right answer, and that your answer as a mere human is the wrong answer. So how can leadership say, okay, here's how we want to use AI, but we need to, as you said, put humans above that?
I mean, it comes down to making sure that organizations are, people are first in any organization. And they should be, right? To your point, if you're hiring the right people for the organizations, then people are first within the organization, right? They are the one that ultimately will deliver the impact that you want for the organization. Now, for me, that goes back to the notion of extreme ownership, right? So as a leader, you should have the mindset, kind of the attitude of leadership being like the single critical factor for the organization to fail or succeed, right? And what that means is that if mistakes are being made, if things change, sometimes without nothing that you did effectively, you have to take responsibility, right? You have to learn from your mistake and take action. And not that you want to do that, but effectively you want to bring that mindset not just for yourself, but you want to bring mindset to everybody else on the team. Effectively, like everybody should be an owner, everybody should be a leader, everybody should be owning and driving and leading something to have the best impact. I think that's what it comes down to, is that as a leader, you want to obviously, if something happens, you take responsibility. If their success is your team's responsibility now that they actually brought that success. And it's how do we delegate ownership at each and every level so that everybody kind of own that piece. And therefore, there needs to be some guardrails about how to use AI, for example, within that context. But each and every one of your employees should have should be empowered to use the tool as best as possible for their need. And as long as they understand the guardrails, and as long as they see that they should be able to experiment, they should be able to take risk, and so on. So for me, that's that, right? It's how to empower everybody in a company to be able to effectively experiment with the technology and see how best to use it.
As a leader, what might those guardrails look like? What are you instituting, and how do those align with the broader business goals?
So for small companies, usually there are not that many guardrails, to be perfectly honest. The biggest guardrail is more around if we really want to push something in production and expose AI directly or AI output directly to our customers, right? That's where the guardrails usually kick in, because it's fine. Whatever we do internally is fine, but we're not too worried about it. But once it impacts our customers, that's where we have to be careful. In bigger companies, there is worries about data protection, which I think is a real worry with AI that you have to be careful about, right? So you can't just feed AI any data, any proprietary data, business data. PII, personally identified information, should be a big no-no, obviously. Like, you don't feed a list of customers to ChatGPT. That would be a very bad idea. So I think that's what some of the guardrails. Right? It's fine to use AI, but do it in a way that doesn't expose what would be considered critical data from your organization. I think for me, that's the main guardrails. And then from a customer standpoint, it's more the notion of hallucinations. How do you mitigate that? How do you verify that? So that you don't damage your brand because your Gen AI is doing something crazy. Especially on the customer service side, right? If you make it too autonomous and now your model starts refunding fraud, for example, or start refunding money to fraudster, that's not a good thing. So there are definitely guardrails up and there, but even internally, I think there are some guardrails. It doesn't have to be a lot, right there, but there should be a policy of some kind on how best to use AI in a way that doesn't compromise your corporation, especially your corporate data.
So,
How do you find that balance? How do you measure it? How do I know I'm giving? Well, obviously, PII is too far in any instance, but how do you know where maybe you're giving some information regarding plans within the organization and hopes of getting an output, but you've pushed it too far? How does an employee know? How does a leader let the employee know what is too far?
The line will be fuzzy anyway. And I think that we already crossed the line in a lot of sectors. For example, in software, like a lot of engineers use on GitHub and use GitHub Copilot. Right? The problem with GitHub Copilot, unless you check that checkbox there, is that it's going to use your code as training data, effectively. And you could argue that at least when you're a tech company, software is your blood, effectively. That's everything you are about. It's the software that you create. So if your software gets leaked in some ways, then you're already giving the keys of the house to somebody else. And companies are doing that already, right? So I do believe that the critical data for me, at least, and every company will have a different understanding there, but would be like any kind of numbers, PI, any kind of customer information that, because from a risk standpoint, like, if you have to comply with GDPR, other privacy frameworks, even in Massachusetts we have one, or the New York DFS 500 cyber rules, or any other thing like that, right? There is a need to understand where your data is, what is your critical data, where is it stored, and how you effectively retain that data. And once you start feeding that data into a ChatGPT, then you lose control, right? Because I don't know where this is going, effectively. So I think that's that, right? Anything that any data that requires compliance, in my opinion, that's where the line is at this point. At least that's what I've seen.
So I have a question based on, so Rob is sharing some information in the chat about the new EU AI Act. We're kind of talking here about how an individual organization and the leadership can talk about what is the box that makes sense for us. Arnaud, what do you see as the relationship between some of these, like, as I mentioned earlier on the philosophy point, right? There's a lot of people talking about ethics in AI and governments are creating policy around these things. The policy might be supportive of your business. I'm not recommending people work outside of the policy, but also there's like a different level of box that probably needs to be observed based on your individual business goals and industry and those types of things. So what do you see as the relationship between those two activities, the internal boxing, shall we call it, and the governing bodies?
So I'm glad that governments are coming up with regulations. At the same time, because it's still very much the Wild West, it's hard to see how those regulations will actually help or not help effectively. I think people are trying to do their best. They're trying to promote innovation, often in a way that doesn't that doesn't make it dangerous for society. I think that's mostly what that's what the regulations are about, right? It's about making sure that AI doesn't hurt the people. That's their main priority, and that's different from what companies should care about. Some of that is related, like the external facing customer aspect of how you use AI in your products. That's what companies are worried about, and because that has a direct implication that actually match very well with that government compliance aspect, which is we don't want to hurt people while we're selling solutions to people. So therefore, we need to be careful about using AI in our products for helping people. Within the internal aspect, it's more compliance and regulatory risk about your corporation, the data, but also not feeding people data into the model. So I think that's the difference, right? So, but ultimately, these the restrictions that I've seen from the EU AI regulation has been more about protecting the data of the people and making sure that there are use cases where AI is not appropriate because it's it kind of undermine the society in some ways, right? So in a way that potentially could be detrimental for it's already happening. It has already happened before Gen AI, but like this notion of fake news or other kind of mistrust on social media and other things, right? Gen AI has the potential to make that. Well, it's not the potential; it's already doing it to inflict even more of that. And so the goal here is to prevent some of these outrageous use cases, and that's going to keep on evolving as we learn more about the tool. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's awesome. And it makes me ask another question because this is how I think. So as leaders, we're leaders and we're looking at how AI can be used throughout the organization. How much of this is like education from a leadership perspective? Because I think honestly, it was news to me at the beginning of this conversation that ChatGPT can't do math. Right? I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what it can do. And then I also think that a lot of how an organization uses something is based on the example set by the leadership. So how much of this is just about education, and then over and above what you do, of course, do you have some good recommendations for educational materials specifically for leaders in this arena?
So the first part, I think, for me, it's more than education. It's almost like disclaimer, right? So every time that AI is used, or specifically Gen AI, but I will argue that machine learning is not that much different. Like Gen AI is really another iteration on top of machine learning, which companies are using in their product today. I think there should be a disclaimer about the fact that it's being used effectively. When you post content, but also when when you have something, you interact with something, it should be very clear that this is a Gen AI doing that thing for you, right? Because at least if you as a user you know that, then you can actually. Well, there are two aspects. There is a bad aspect. Oh, this is a Gen AI. Let me try to trick that. That will be my first instinct. Not because I'm a hacker by heart. It's more because, it's like a tool. Let me try to break it. But the other aspect too is I understand the limitations. Right, and I can play with that and say, you're telling me something false. Let me double check. Or what do you mean you can give me a refund? Let me double check your policy to make sure you're telling me the truth. So that's one aspect. So I think that notion of disclaimer, I think, is important. I think that that's part of the regulations, right? Is to have more of that disclaimer about AI may hurt you, kind of thing, if you're not careful. But the other aspect is education, and there are plenty of trainings and articles talking about educating you about AI. Right? I've done even on LinkedIn. Right? There are a couple of courses that are actually very good that goes through step by step all the kind of hallucinations, how to mitigate them. Like really goes deep into how to understanding what Gen AI can and cannot do. So that you get that sense, right? The problem is not that, or it does matter that it exists. The problem is that Gen AI has a potential to touch the life of everybody. Even not practitioner like me, right? I use Gen AI every day, but even people that don't do that, they are just exposed to Gen AI. Feels like everybody at some point will get exposed to it. And to your point, they need to be educated about what Gen AI is and what it can and cannot do. And I'm not sure how to fix that, right? Because ultimately, that's an education at scale right there. People have limited time. So is it some kind of social campaign so that it shows up into your social media feed?
It reminds me of like my sister was in this commercial when we were kids called "Not All Bugs Need Drugs," and it was about how like viruses don't need antibiotics and stuff like that. Almost like a public service campaign.
Exactly, and for me, that's needed, at least in the current state of the technology. Maybe at some point it's going to get so much better than that you won't need that. But at this stage, I would be very worried about people getting exposed to Gen AI without having any understanding of it, right? And I'm worried because it's already there. Like I mentioned, the notion of my daughter's friend in 7th grade using it. It's like
Although I will tell you, I mentioned it at the school playground the other day because this mom was trying to figure out how to turn on some parental controls on something, and I was like, "Oh, have you asked ChatGPT?" And she was like, "What? What is that?" And I was like, "Oh." I always feel like I'm so far behind on AI, but I'm not in the global population.
Well, at some point, everybody is going to get exposed to it, even if they don't know what it is.
Well, now I'm introducing it to people, so there you go.
Exactly, you're part of the problem. So, that's the problem. Like, how do you educate at scale more than anything else? And I don't have a good answer for you. That's not my area of expertise.
So Tracy, you're the ChatGPT dealer hanging out.
I'm the Strathmore ChatGPT dealer.
Which explains hallucinations.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get people to only use it for good.
Arnaud,
but I don't even know all of the things it can do. I don't know. And this is the thing that's interesting and why I love conversations like this is because it brings to light things you don't know. And then you can dive deeper into those things to try and learn more. But until, like, if you think you know, then you just go and use a tool. And there's a lot of marketers using it to create content and things like that. And they don't have a good understanding of what it can do, what it's good at, when it's hallucinating, how to pressure test things. And I think it's important to help people understand what they don't know.
Arnaud, we've talked about leaders installing guardrails.
Mhm.
What are some of the biggest barriers to implementing a successful AI strategy as opposed to simply lock it all down, pretend that it's not accessible?
In my opinion, in order to use it successfully in any organization, you can't just use the vanilla use case. Or you can't just pop up a ChatGPT app and start putting prompts in there. Right? It's more involved than that, because you need to be able to use some of your proprietary data to match your use cases. Which potentially having your own model, trained in a certain way. You need to have workflows in place. You need to have a way to run it in a way that's cost effective, which is another aspect. Like you can, we use Snowflake, for example. In Snowflake, you can run a GenAI algorithm in your SQL query just right there. Like you say, as part of my SQL, as GenAI, I choose the algorithm to run my query and give me the insights, right? The problem with that is that Snowflake says, please use GenAI, but you're going to be charged by compute time. And GenAI are way more expensive than just running a standard SQL query. Let's just put it this way. So there is a cost aspect. So there is all these kind of side things, but also the fact that at the end of the day, you really have to understand what is the critical use cases that you believe GenAI can help with, and start prototyping around it, right? You'll be able to play with it. Start with a small use case, start with a part of the use case, really iterate on it, and then keep on expanding. It's like any technology. Like any technology, you do that, right? You don't just say, I have this big thing and it's going to take 6 months to get there, and therefore I know exactly what I need to do, and then I'll see you in 6 months, right? That's never what you should be doing, right? It's like, great, I have this 6 month thing that I want to have, right? I have this strategy that I want to implement. Great. What's the first step? Great. Let's learn from the first step. What's the second step now? And make your way. And ultimately, you're going to end up in a different place than the one that you strategize for. But that's actually better, right? And so I think for me, GenAI is the same way. Right, is that because as you start implementing it, you learn about its limitation, you learn about the need for guardrails, right? Because you start expressing it internally or in ways that are focused, and then you're going to say, this user did something wrong with it. I should make sure that we don't do that again. And so you learn, and then you keep on iterating and expanding, right? And that's part of making your way into the center of the radar, of the tech radar that I mentioned as well. So
we too have ended up in a different place. Arnaud, this has been great. Where can people learn more? How can they get in touch with you?
So the best pattern I've been using for myself has been LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn profile by far is the best place. I'm actually planning to start publishing some articles about hallucinations next week. So it's a very timely topic for me, because that's what I've been focusing on writing the last couple of weeks. It's about that topic exactly, and the danger of GenAI, because people talk a lot about the promises, which they're there, or GenAI is here to stay. Now, I believe there is a bit of a bubble right now, but at some point that we will see what the real use cases are. But I'm more worried about what Tracy was mentioning, that people don't understand the limitations and how to deal with them. So that's something I want to write about.
Excellent. We now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get show highlights, beyond the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. You can scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live/newsletter. On behalf of the panelists, to our guest, and to our audience, thank you all for making this another highly interactive and entertaining episode of